Good evening, everyone. I welcome you all to this meeting of the Cardinia Shire Council Town Planning Committee and declare the meeting open at 7 p.m. This meeting will be conducted in accordance with Council's governance rules. It's important for members of the public present in the gallery. I'm sure a lot of you haven't been to a council meeting before that you respect the setting, do not disrupt the meeting, particularly during debate and discussion by councillors on items in the agenda. We're going to commence this meeting with the following reflection. I would ask those gathered to join us now for a few moments of silence as we reflect on our roles in this chamber. Please use this opportunity for reflection, prayer or thought to focus on our shared intention to work respectfully together for the well-being of our whole community. Thank you, everyone. The Cardinia Shire Council respectfully acknowledges that we are on the traditional lands of the Bunurong and Wurundjeri people and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. There are no apologies for the meeting tonight. We do have Councillor Ross, Councillor Payton and Councillor Roberts joining us virtually, as you can see on the screen. Item number 4, declarations of interest. Councillors, are there any declarations of interest in relation to tonight's meeting? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. Although quite remote, I do believe through my line of work there is a connection with me and an employee of the applicant in agenda item number 2. And I do believe there could be a perceived conflict of interest, so I'll remove myself.
Thank you. So just to confirm, that's item 5.2?
Yes, Mayor.
Thank you. We'll note that down. Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Are there any other conflicts of interest? Councillor Colin Ross, I can see your hand.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't believe it is a conflict of interest which stops me from pertaining on the discussion, but in item number 2, I am a regular churchgoer, have been for years. I attend many churches. The Baptist church I attend, Crossways Baptist in Nunawading. I attend the Baptist church in Brighton, and I have attended the Baptist church in Officer, but I don't believe it's any more than basically anything like going to a different group. We don't have to pay any money in any churches. You go there on your own free will. There's no prerequisites in the course of doing it.
Are you going to declare a conflict of interest for this item or not?
Look, I believe I'll put it out there that it be known on this basis, but I don't believe it is a conflict of interest. So anyway,
okay,
thank
so
you,
no
Mayor.
interest. Thank you. All right, so we've got one for Councillor Thompson, and I believe that's it. We'll move into the meeting. Thanks, everyone. So item 5.1.1, starting in ordinary business, T240108, PA use and development of a 3-storey residential hotel, alteration of access to a road in TRZ2, subdivision of land and creation of easement at 71 Racecourse Road, Pakenham. The officer's recommendation here is that Council resolve to issue a notice of decision to grant a permit for planning permit application T240108PA for use and development of a 3-storey residential hotel, alteration of access road, subdivision of land and creation of easements at 71 Racecourse Road, Pakenham, subject to the following conditions as listed in the agenda, and authorise the Manager of Planning and Design or Coordinator of Stat Planning to instruct Council's stat planners and or Council's advocates on any future application for review at the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal, provided that any proposed amendments do not alter the Council's decision. Whether it be approval or refusal, do not introduce significant changes to the proposal. Do I have a mover for this first item tonight? Councillor Potter.
I would like to move the officer's motion as noted.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Is there a seconder for this item? Councillor Nicol. Councillor Potter to speak first.
I feel that this will be a great asset to the community of Cardinia. I do empathise with the concerns of the objectors, but I feel that they have also been carefully considered. And I think it would be a common courtesy that the communication with the neighbours is very important, so they are at least kept in the loop and know what's going on. I am content that the measures have been put in place to alleviate their concerns where possible, though. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. I'll go to your seconder, Councillor Nicol.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I I've read the application carefully, including the objectors' letters, and on balance, I think that I need to support the application. It's an allowable activity in the zone, and there's been extensive work and commendable work by the officers to actually ensure that some of the design principles that are applied to the building in question are best practice. In particular, what has swayed my decision to support the application is the setback required from the northern boundary, which actually gives a little bit of space for the three-storey building from the neighbours who are over the back of the building to the north, and the landscaping that will occur in that area. And also the design principles that were required by our officers to ensure that overlooking concerns by the design of the balcony and the windows that are looking to the north are alleviated by design according to standards. Those two key aspects, I think, make it a application that will, on balance, provide a benefit to the Shire and to the district. The other thing, I guess, that goes in favour of the application is it is a residential hotel, and so if there's unsocial behaviour or incidents that are not neighbourly in nature, action can be taken quickly to address that issue. So on balance, taking into account the deep concerns that are put forward by the objectors, I nevertheless support the application overall. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nicol. Are there any other councillors to speak to this debate? I see Councillor Brett Owen, and I note the two councillors online as well.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to the previous speakers. Tonight, we consider this application for the use and development of a three-storey residential hotel, alteration of access to road, a subdivision of land and creation of easements at 71 Racecourse Road. It is recommended by the officers that a notice of decision to grant a permit be issued, as the proposal for the three-storey residential hotel and subdivision is supported by the planning policy framework, local planning policy framework, and the zone and overlays. It provides for an appropriate use in a residential zone and is of good architectural design that is complement with the objectives and standards of the scheme. This site is an appropriate location for such a use, given its strategic location along Racecourse Road, its proximity to the Pakenham Town Centre, and also its co-location with the existing Mercure Hotel and the Cardinia Club facilities. The car parking arrangements proposed have been accepted by Council's traffic engineers and can be appropriately managed through conditions and agreements. While the proposal demonstrates a high level of compliance with the requirements of the planning scheme, as detailed in the report, the concerns of objectors have also been carefully considered and measures put in place to alleviate them where possible. This includes conditions requiring screen plantings along the northern boundary to respond to concerns about visual bulk, outlook and acoustic fencing. So I support this. This provides another option for our residents, for alternative accommodation, also visitors and friends and family of our residents. It's always been a challenge for our Shire to attract these sorts of accommodation, and we've seen it with the Mercure, and we now going to see it with this application. I think that's a positive. Over my years on council, I've received, concerns raised by residents. They've got nowhere for family to stay. We have events, whether we have, games, sporting activities. It's a real challenge for those people to find accommodation. So this will provide another, I think, a quality option for those people to stay in Pakenham and Cardinia. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. I'll go to Councillor Roberts and then Councillor Payton.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. With this application, there have been 5 objections, primarily from adjoining neighbours, and I concur with a number of the other councillors who've noted the need for this type of accommodation in Pakenham. The plans do show that the proponent has taken into account a number of the concerns from the objectors regarding noise and lighting, and they've set the building at a decent setback, as was mentioned by Councillor Nicol. My key concern is with regard to the parking provision. On the site itself, there is a 29 bay shortfall, and the way that is proposed to deal with this is a share arrangement of 24 bays from the neighbouring Cardinia Club. My lived experience is that the Cardinia Club is often very busy, and in fact, when it is busy, currently uses the proposed site as an overflow parking location. My concern is that at busy times, Cardinia Club patrons will have to park in other locations if the 24 bays are being used by the hotel accommodation users. There is not other locations around this site for people to park. Racecourse Road has quite a lot of no standing area. There's parking across the street, but that is meant for the small shopping centre. And this really means that there is a likelihood of parking on the side streets such as Cameron Way and Simon Drive. The neighbouring use, the club, is a venue where people can come and go. They can turn up to the bar or to the electronic gaming machines throughout the hours that the venue's open. So I'm unsure how it's going to be practically managed by the venue and the hotel on a day-to-day basis. There aren't a lot of public transport options. The buses are infrequent, and it is still a fair walk to the train station. So for the sake of the neighbouring residents, I don't feel I can support this application. I just feel it's fallen over on such a significant, important part of the application, which is the transport and parking aspect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. I'll go to Councillor Payton.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, councillors, for your comments. Apologies if I repeat some of what you've said, but I have a prepared statement. I've reviewed the officer's recommendation and supporting material for this application, and I've also had a short discussion with the applicant, Arthur Lim from Pro Urban. I think it's necessary to look at the objections raised and consider whether they've been adequately addressed by council officers and the applicant. I think that they have. There have been design modifications to reduce the impact of noise, privacy, safety and waste management during construction, and whilst the completed building is in use. I consider whether the council officer's recommendations will adequately future-proof impacts caused by changes in ownership or changed use of the property, especially in relation to the provision of car parking spaces. And Councillor Roberts, I shared your concerns on that, which is why I asked more questions. Council officers have requested a 1-to-1 ratio of car parks to be supplied for the number of hotel rooms. I think this is generous. I was concerned that the permit relied on an agreement under Section 173 of the Planning and Environment Act, so that the owner of the Cardinia Club will agree to share car park spaces to comply with this 1-to-1 ratio. I too wasn't sure how this would play out. I'm satisfied through my discussions that the terms of this agreement are adequate for the foreseeable future of this and neighbouring properties. Firstly, the agreement will require a change on the title of both lots 5 and 6, and therefore won't be easily removed, changed or reneged. Secondly, the permit requests that a car park management plan be agreed and managed between the parties of lots 5 and 6, that being the Cardinia Club and this new development, and ensuring that demand for car parking is supplied and that conflict is minimised. An example, Councillor Roberts and others, that was given to me is that as part of that management, Something that might occur is if the Cardinia Club has a special event on, they will contact the residential hotel, advise them that the parking is likely to be quite busy on a particular day, and numbers would be adjusted according to that. So I think in this instance, the conditions imposed by Council to safeguard this project from unreasonably infringing on the rights of surrounding property owners is adequate, and I support the request for Council officers to grant this permit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Payton. Are there any other speakers to this item? Councillor Pomeroy.
I think it's important to note in relation to this regard that the car parking provisions that many of us were concerned about in this hotel and these developments are predominantly actually business instead of leisure travellers, and a lot of those people that are coming in aren't necessarily always driving. Had the opportunity to attend the Driscoll's opening the other day. They've invested 40 million into our Shire, and they had both interstate and international delegation that came into Cardinia, and they spoke about not only the difficulty of getting accommodation, but none of them were driving cars. They were actually being picked up. And when we talk about the train station being far away, many of us travel into interstate cities or into Melbourne, and we definitely take more than the 500 metres walk that it would be from Pakenham to this site. So I think it has been really well considered, and I do thank the officers for really putting forward, but also the applicant for coming back a number of times and making sure that the residents' voices have been heard. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers to this item? Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor. I concur with Councillor Owen on this basis that this is an urgent need that we do have in Cardinia Shire. We've really lacked to have a capacity for people to stay here other than people who live here or perhaps work here. And this is a development on the back of the Mercure Hotel that will continue and enlarge in our capacity to have people come to Cardinia Shire and be able to stay here. So perhaps it opens up the doorway for conferences, perhaps it opens up the doorways for more people to have their residents come and visit and stay within the Shire. Anyway, I think it is a good development. My fellow councillors have shared their concerns about the objections, and they've been addressed, and also to the amount of conditions that have been put in place that would ensure that the applicant would have to comply and work within the Shire. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Just before I go back to Councillor Potter to sum up, I just want to add my 2 cents in. I am going to support this application tonight and agree with the officer recommendation and vote yes for this. I think it is in an area that we want to promote development, and I think it's indicative of a Shire and a town in Pakenham that's on the up, that we're seeing local businesses expanding, that we're seeing this investment come in. So, of course, parking is an area of concern, particularly as Pakenham continues to grow, and once that grows starts to slow down. I do think that parking in this particular site will be an issue, but I think parking for the town more broadly in any town that is busy becomes an issue. So we mitigate that where we can, and I think we've done that, and I thank the officers for their commitment to that. I also do just want to thank the objectors for willingly taking the time to put their objections in. I think that's always important to note. One of the difficult things I think for us from a planning perspective is that I think because, as Councillor Owen mentioned, the use is appropriate for this application, I am of the belief that even if council rejected this, it would go to VCAT and go through. So I'm happy to support it tonight with the conditions we've put on it. And lastly, I do just want to highlight, I think a project that goes hand in hand in this is the Racecourse Road duplication project from Henry Street to the Princess Highway. So Vic Roads, please bring this project forward. Federal government, there's an election coming up. I think you can see this area is growing and we need that vitally. All right, I'll go to Councillor Potter to sum this item up for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. This project opens up the area for more visitors and more businesses in Cardinia. It is an allowable activity in the zone in an area we want to promote for development, and it's well designed. It's in character of the area and it will be an asset. I feel the objectors' concerns have been carefully considered, such as requiring screen plantings along the northern boundary, acoustic fencing, construction management requirements, external lighting design requirements and compliance with overlooking privacy. And with this, I need to mention, I also, like Councillor Roberts, was concerned about the car parking sharing between Cardinia Club and the new build and how it would work. But especially because there's not much street parking being around the area of question, and there were no other suggestions other than using the car parks at the club having been put forward. So if the club's full, there's little or no street parking in that build. But I don't think that the car parking is a deal breaker here at all, and the benefits outweigh the cons. And also, I understand that there would be a 173 agreement under the Planning Environment Act, and as Councillor Payton outlined, and it is the same group who owns the Cardinia Club as who is building the hotel. So I feel that communication would be really clear between the club and the hotel if it was busy, because they are the same group. And it's just a risk that they run themselves, as they are the same group. And I know I've stayed in hotels where I've parked away from the hotel and I've Ubered to and fro, and I've also caught Ubers to meals. So I think it's really plausible. It will be a source of alternative accommodation for residents and their families, and also business people who often don't drive cars. And it's close to things. It's in proximity to the services of Pakenham Town Centre and everything that goes with that, Mercure Hotel and the Cardinia Club facilities. And I'm sure Uber will do well from it too. I also want to thank the objectors and honour their concerns and hope that they feel they have been heard too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. So we'll now put the officer recommendation to item 5.1.1 up for a vote. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. Moving on to item 5.2. T240047 PA, use and development of land for the purpose of a place of worship, construction and display of signage and reduction in car parking spaces required at 4/108 Mulcahy Road, Pakenham. Thank you. I'll just read out the officer recommendation and then I'll go. So the officer recommendation as listed in the report is as follows: that council resolve to issue a notice of decision to refuse to grant a permit for planning permit application T240047 on the grounds listed in the agenda, and authorise the Manager of Planning and Design Coordinator of Statutory Planning to instruct Council's stat planners and Council's advocates on any future application for review at VCAT, provided that any proposed amendments do not alter the Council's decision, whether it be approval or refusal, and do not introduce significant changes to the proposal. So that is the officer's recommendation. Councillor Potter, you wanted to jump in.
I do. Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move an alternate motion to approve this item, please.
Okay, please read out your alternate. Thank you.
T240047 PA, use and development of land for the purpose of a place of worship, construction and display of signage, and reduction in car parking spaces required at 4/108 Mulcahy Road, Pakenham. Part A, that a notice of decision to grant a permit for application T40047 PA for the use and development of a land for purpose of place of worship, construction and display of signage and reduction of car parking spaces required be issued, subject to the conditions which will be listed in the minutes and provided to councillors prior. Part B, that council authorise the Manager, Planning and Design Coordinator, Statutory Planning to instruct council statutory planners and or council's advocates on any future application for review at the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal, provided that any proposed amendments do not alter the council's decision, whether it be approval or refusal, and do not introduce significant changes to the proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Is there a seconder for this item? I see Councillor Ross online first. Councillor Potter to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe saying a blanket no to this application would be a missed opportunity for our Shire. The qualitative effects of this type of work that this applicant do are difficult to simply quantify, but they are so important for our local community. My concern would be that if we didn't offer a suggested compromise, the group might even move to another LGA altogether. I think it's important for us at Council to work with all ethical social support groups to keep them working in Cardinia, no matter what religion they are from or not. Tonight, the real question we should be asking isn't, do they have enough car parks? The real question is, do we have enough social support services and organisations that are truly building up our community and supporting people facing big adaptive and social challenges, including mental health? Because let's be clear, we cannot afford to lose a group like this. In today's world, groups like this do so much of the heavy lifting in the social support space. They give their time freely, offering hours upon hours of volunteer work, unpaid counselling and practical support to those in need. They stand by families, elderly, young people and the most vulnerable in our community. They have never let us down, so why should we let them down now? If we truly believe in an inclusive, supportive society, then we must work alongside ethical social support groups, no matter their background, religious or not. True inclusivity means recognising the value they bring, not putting barriers in their way, and working with them to make it reasonable for them to meet our important planning requirements. Now, I understand some practical concerns have been raised, so let's address them. Operating hours versus car parks. Their hours are mostly after working hours and on weekends, meaning they won't interfere with nearby businesses. And let's be honest, if this were about one of our beloved footy clubs or other types of groups, would we be so worried about a few extra cars spilling outside? I love football too, but we all know it happens all the time.
Councillor Potter,
May I have 1 more minute?
you absolutely can. You're not short of time, but I just get you to stick to the application as it relates to
No
rather than
worries.
talking about footy club.
No worries. Well, no one bats an eye anyway. It's part of life when things spill out. The industrial land use. The area is already thriving with businesses in this area, such as a cafe, pottery school and dance school. It's a hub of activity and this group fits right in. There is a planning definition that states places of assembly can build in industrial, green wedge and residential areas, which means places of worship can. I understand this group has a property in Officer, Tivendale Road, but of course the cost of newer churches to establish in residential areas is prohibitively expensive with the road development required and all the circumstances associated. So to me, the choices are clear. Places of worship want to spend their money generally on charity works if possible, not roads. So it makes sense they go where it's fiscally responsible for them, such as this application. Also, Cardinia is not short of places for industrial development, as there are other areas in Cardinia which are also for this type of zoning. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. I'll go to Councillor Ross. Sorry.
I reserve my right to speak about this. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I understand, we've got lots of people in the room and it's very exciting and a bit contentious, but please, if we could have no rounds of applause just while we're having this debate. Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Potter, for moving this alternative motion to provide a permit. It is definitely a challenging decision tonight before us. No doubt, I've got a strong history of really, making sure car parking is adequate for many facilities across the Shire, but I've looked at this report very closely. I went for a drive yesterday afternoon where this will be a peak period, and it's a very unique site. Mulcahy Road is quite a large road. There's a lot of ample on-street car parking on my Mulcahy Road. I've read the report in full. I've read the objections, and I do acknowledge those objections. I've read a number of letters of support and offering other car parks attached to other businesses. Definitely, that may change in the future, but at this stage, a lot of abutting businesses are supporting the use of their car parks. It is definitely unique. It was very quiet yesterday afternoon when this would be a very peak period for this church. So I acknowledge that. It's different circumstances. You've got to treat each application on its merits. And yesterday, when I was there seemed to be a lot of car parking available. Most businesses were closed. To have large numbers or numbers of this type is a great thing. People in the area, natural surveillance, provides, security for abutting businesses. So I think it's positive. I do acknowledge there is some concerns, but through the conditions, through Councillor Potter has mentioned, there is definitely obligations on the applicant to make sure that traffic works, car parking works. It's not adverse to other businesses. There are some conditions, and I'm sure the people behind the church will be able to work through that and make it very possible without adverse impacts on abutting businesses. So I support the alternative. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. I'll go to Councillor Payton, then Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Mayor. I echo Councillor Potter's sentiments. We cannot afford to lose the enormous community benefits provided by this church group just because we can't grant them a home. Cardinia's strategic plan should underpin all actions and decisions made, ensuring that officers don't rely purely on technical compliance data, but observe processes that allow staff to interpret legislation within the context of the strategic vision. In the current council plan, two of the key focus areas are strong communities and livable places. To deliver places and services that underpin vibrant, thriving, resilient and healthy communities, Cardinia needs to enable and empower the activities of community groups like the Follow Baptist Church who deliver and answer the needs of our communities in ways that no level of government funding or service can. We are really missing opportunities if we only look to the two or three tiers of government to meet community need. Council must actively partner with community groups like this one, who are often more accessible and more trusted by those who are vulnerable and so better placed as the first responders to their need. The failing in this application is more that local and state government do not provide suitable zoning and spaces to accommodate places of worship. Prior to applying, this applicant cast a wide net to find accommodation, and this site was the best of a bad lot. The church had to squeeze its application into the confines of an industrial estate, and I think we all know that's less than ideal. Nitpicking on technical aspects of how parking permissions are sought has led to a decision that fails to promote Cardinia's strategic vision. I ask that tonight's vote will assist that future decisions are assessed through a broader strategic lens in addition to technical compliance, and instead of looking at how the application fails rigorous testing, considers how planners can assist applicants of merit to succeed. Passing the alternate motion adopts the spirit and intent of Cardinia's vision. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Payton. Councillor Roberts.
Mayor. Places of worship are allowed under a number of zonings, as was referred to by Councillor Potter. I believe that people have the right to exercise spiritually as much as they do physically. There are a number of different industrial uses in industrial and other uses that are in this particular pocket of this small industrial area in Pakenham, which was one of the earlier areas of Pakenham that was zoned industrial. So it's ended up being other small uses in there as well, like gymnasiums and shops and outlets relating to some of the industrial activity that's occurring, such as the dairy and the pottery place. Churches have a difficulty in that when it comes to creating the large structure plans that we do, 10 or 15, 20 years out, that the communities that are going to live there aren't there yet. They're not physically present to advocate for land to be zoned as it may need to be at the time. Those churches haven't formed up to say, look, we'd like to have a piece of this land here next to this other community centre or other community use. They come along after all that planning is done, and often that puts them on the back foot, having to purchase residential land at higher value, or as we've seen in other cases, to skip outside the growth area altogether. I see this potentially as a way forward for this particular group that contributed a lot to our Shire. It's a bit of a chicken and egg scenario in that it's difficult for churches like this to get in early enough to get the right position for their community to establish. Parking is the main concern that has been raised in the officer's report, but I acknowledge that the applicant has endeavoured to establish some partnerships already that might lead to parking being able to provide it off roadsides at other locations. And if this motion is successful, I strongly encourage the applicant to pursue securing this parking in a stronger legal fashion and to have a good plan for how they move their people to and from their vehicles to the church. I also would recommend that the applicant, if this motion is successful, keep in mind that they are operating in an industrial area, and this sometimes means that there's some other amenities such as footpaths and crossovers that are not necessarily usually provided in this in an industrial area, and that they need to have plans in place for the safety of their congregation. It's my intention to support this alternative motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Are there any other speakers to this item? I see Councillor Nicol.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, look, it's interesting. I was greatly concerned about this application when it came into our matters for reading. We've got industrial zones set aside for a purpose. It's to make stuff. But it seems to be the way that Australia is running at the moment, that all we do in industrial zones is store stuff imported from China in big warehouses, create kids' play centres, and now churches. So I grappled with this sort of idea, and I've been thinking about it all weekend. What's going on? You know, why is it that places of worship are ending up in the green wedges, which are supposed to be growing food, and in industrial zones, which are supposed to be making stuff? And really, it sort of points to something big. And I think Councillor Roberts touched on it in terms of structure planning and who's responsible to think ahead of time about the value that congregations and people of faith and communities of faith actually create for our society. What's actually happening, I believe, is that as we become a pagan society again, we're starting to forget 1,700 years worth of history, in that people of faith and congregations have been front and centre and a core part of our society and the foundation for civil society, which then after the Enlightenment has made a lot of changes in society that we all take for granted now, and I think we've forgotten it. These places should be front and centre in our civic areas, in places of prominence, standing proud as a place where people can go and learn to become good citizens and learn to think beyond themselves and their own immediate interests and hobbies, and think about other people, in this case, as the Baptist Church's founder, Jesus Christ, asked them to do. So in that context, if they're being pushed to the edges and they're being pushed into industrial estates and to green wedges, and that's the place they can find their home where they can continue to practice their faith, that's a statement about perhaps what society's broader priorities are becoming as we become increasingly pagan. So my last question I've got really is about council's role strategically. Perhaps we need to do some work in this. And my other question is to developers. Who's your God? There's a very, very old God in motion in our society at the moment, and that's called Mammon.
Sorry, Councillor Nicol, you're out of time.
So,
and just if we could stick to the planning application,
I think council has got more work to do to set aside space in our civic centres and put these communities of faith back where they belong in
Oh,
town.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Pomeroy.
Sorry. I'd just like to commend the council officers on this. As you can see, when you've got state legislation, you've got planning approvals, these are really difficult. What they are coming down to is there enough car spaces? Is it incompatible? And if you just look at those two things, they've done the right thing in refusing this. But as Councillor Potter has put forward in her alternative motion, as a council and a group of councillors, we will vote on whether that is the right thing or the wrong thing. So I love that everyone's turned up today, and we've spoken a lot about the community and the importance here, but that is not what we're here to judge on. We're actually here to judge on the things for the planning, and this is why it's a town planning meeting. So while those all come into it, I think there is a greater piece, like many of us have spoken to, about the state playing the role into where places of worship go into the future, because there's certain faiths that form towns. You know, there was a church and there was a racecourse and there was another church, and they've had the luxury of being in prominent spaces with parking that isn't adequate. Like if you drive past a lot of those churches on a Sunday or at a funeral or whatever, there are people spilled out onto the road in the nature strip. So in my consideration, that's where I've put it. If any other church was to come in an existing spot and say the car parking, they wouldn't pass these days based on our current. So I would like to support and thank Councillor Potter for putting forward an alternate motion.
Thank you, Councillor Pomeroy. Councillor Ross, would you like to speak to this item?
Thank you, Mayor. Before I speak to the item, can I please get some clear governance around this from our governance managers? What we're doing is we're voting firstly on the substantive motion, which is a refusal, right? If that fails, we go on to the alternate motion to vote on to support the proposal. So is that right? I just want to make that clear before everybody votes on this, because it can get quite complicated. Because if we think the alternate motion is up first and people think they're voting to support something, they could actually be supporting to support the refusal. So I just want some clear identification on this to make sure that we are very, very clear.
What we're doing is that I read out the officer recommendation first.
Yes.
With no movers for that. Councillor Potter put her first up and is presenting an amended motion. So what we're debating and we'll be voting on first is Councillor Potter's amended motion, because the officer's recommendation had no movers and no seconders. So Councillor Potter's motion, amended motion, which is essentially to approve the church with conditions, is what we're debating right now, and we'll be subsequently going to the vote once you speak, I speak, and Councillor Potter sums up. So you're up, Councillor Ross.
Sensational, Mayor. I was wondering why you were reading out the recommendation when it hadn't been moved. But anyway, that's made it clear for me. Thank you. First of all, I visited the site 6 times at the adjudged hours, and it is exactly correct. There is ample car parking in those times to make sure that this business is within inside its application. I think it should be noted too that this application is no different to what is up in Casey and Dandenong. They have many places of worship in the very, very similar industrial areas with reduction of car parks. So it is consistent with other areas around. Also too, many places in Cardinia Shire in the past have been passed as places of worship in industrial areas with reduced car parking. There's not one of them that I've seen in my time on council that actually had the amount of car parking. So it's consistent with allowing that. And I've never seen anybody complain about a church so far about having an overflow of car parks in off hours as well. Also too, I think it was highlighted by Councillor Payton that our council plan actually supports cultural diversity, religious groups and different groups and want to support these people. Our council plan does. And it's interesting that in the last 4 years, we did not vote for one place of worship to have a place of worship within inside Cardinia Shire. In fact, I think it goes probably 8 years. So this will be a move by this council to have a look at things with a different prism and believe that, you know, this is the sort of thing that we need to be moving towards. Also, too, it was highlighted by some of my fellow councillors about the volunteerism of groups like this, the religious groups and cultural diverse groups within inside Cardinia Shire. Many places around Australia are having a huge problem with volunteerism in the traditional means, but these cultural groups are taking up the baton and filling these spots in volunteerism to allow our Cardinia Shire to continue all of the things that we're doing. So that's another thing. Also, too, with the alternate motion, you'll see there's 18 conditions to apply for the group to uphold. I know in the past that this group in particular always abide by what they're asked to do. We've never had a problem with them. And in fact, the senior leader of the group is our Citizen of the Year, and I know that he absolutely abides by all the things. He's come along. He's happy to talk with people about the application and what they do. So I'm very, very encouraged to hear tonight that so many people are supporting this application, and the fact that we're looking far greater than a few car parks that mightn't fall within inside the planning network. But as Councillor Nichols said, there is a really big problem in this area. The places of worship in the past have been knocked back. Hopefully this time they won't be knocked back, and we can see a way forward to make sure that they do feel welcome in Cardinia Shire, and they'll continue to be here, and it'll encourage other people to come as well. So thank you, Mayor, and I hope that my fellow councillors support this alternate notice of motion, and this church can get on with what they do well, which is supporting the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Yeah, I'll just jump in again before I go back to Councillor Potter to sum up. I think everyone has spoken to this item. I am going to support this, but I do want to thank the officers for their advice, as Councillor Pomeroy mentioned, and thank them for providing their reasons why they couldn't support it. And I think what's happened here, and probably why there's so much community interest, is there's a fundamental difference between the role our planners play and the role we play on the Town Planning Committee. So our planners operate inside the state planning scheme. They have to comply with something like the car parking thing that's become the crux of the issue here. As your democratically elected leaders on this council and on this committee, we too operate under the state planning scheme, but we can consider the community as a broader impact. And so that's why Councillor Potter, through her alternate, is able to talk to the planners and come up with an alternative there around allowing this church to operate in this space. I mean, it's clear, despite the conversations around some of the great work that the church does, the main issue here is car parking. And I think it's clear through the great work that the church has done. It's grown its congregation to quite a large group now, as evidenced by in the chambers. But that means from that planning perspective that it does fall way under the car parking thing. But I think Councillor Owen is right. Like, I live very, very close to this area. I'm in this area frequently, and it is, particularly at the hours of operation that this church is going to operate in, it is very, very quiet frequently. There are other businesses there. There's a lot of car parking there inside the factories. There's a lot of car parking on the roads. So I think we're going to be okay. And my expectation is that this group will be good neighbours. And so that is what I'm basing my decision on. I do think Councillor Roberts made a really good point before when she said it is industrial area. So I think we need to have our eyes open going into this, that there aren't footpaths on both sides of the road. The standards are a little bit different in an industrial area, but I do think that the group knows that. So I'm happy to support this. I think the challenges have been well laid out by my fellow councillors, and I thank everyone for their contribution to this debate. Councillor Potter, your motion to sum up, please.
At the heart of this is a bigger vision for our community support and council's strategic vision for inclusivity. One where everyone has the freedom to seek guidance, connection and care in a way that resonates with them locally. As Councillor Owen said, there were a lot of car parks available yesterday, and I'm sure the applicant will continue to be a productive member and work with their neighbours if challenges arise, and I trust they will adhere to any reasonable conditions required of them. As Councillor Payton shared, we as a council need to look at not only just technical applies, but assist applicants of merit to succeed. As Councillor Roberts stated, when it comes to creating the larger plans of communities 20 years in the future, The communities aren't there yet, and most churches haven't formed yet, which puts them on the back foot to have to buy higher land prices on the outskirts. It's a bit of a chicken and the egg scenario, she said. Hopefully we can work on this as a council. Maybe we can look outside the box with car parking solutions and planning solutions that are legal, and to keep in mind that it's an industrial area, so they ensure they have safety plans for their congregation. As Councillor Nicol stated, we do need to protect our industrial zones, not just for Chinese imports, play centres and churches, but we need to look at structure planning ahead of time, to think about it ahead of time. Places of faith should be front and centre in our civic areas, I agree, so people can go to learn to think about themselves and other people. If pushed to the edges, they find a home, then that's a statement of society's broader values, and I'd like to see council make some strategic decisions to set aside space in our town centres in the future. As our Deputy Mayor said, I'd also like to commend our council officers. Planning requirements are important and correct. As Councillor Ross said, there's ample car parking, and it's similar to applications in Casey and Dandenong and other places of worship in Cardinia with reduced car parks. Our council plans actually support cultural diversity and inclusion, and volunteerism is challenging, and groups like this allow us to continue to support the community. And that the senior member of the group was actually the Citizen of the Year in Cardinia, and I'm sure we'll always try to be a good neighbour, as our mayor said. So yeah, car parking in the area is quiet. There is a lot of car parking on the road, and this group will be good neighbours. And yeah, I think it's a good idea to have your eyes open, as it is an industrial area when it comes to safety. I believe in a future where our community is welcoming and inclusive to all places of worship, no matter what religion or not, and social support groups that ethically give back, uplift and serve. That's the kind of community I want to help build in Cardinia. The car park issues are not insurmountable, and I'm pleased with the alternate motion. I believe this motion will create a stronger, more connected, compassionate Cardinia that is truly inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. All right, we'll now put your alternate motion to 5.2 up for a vote. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We're now going to bring Councillor Casey Thompson back in. We are going to be continuing on with the meeting, so if you are leaving, please do so very quietly. Otherwise, you're very welcome to stay. All right, thank you, everyone. We will keep going on now. Appreciate that. We'll go to item 5.3, which is T210808 PA, construction of 5 dwellings on a lot at 10 Cardinia Street, Pakenham. The officer recommendation is that council resolve to issue a notice of decision to refuse to grant a permit for the planning permit application, as I read above, on the grounds listed in the agenda, and authorise the manager of planning as listed in the agenda to advocate ad VCAT. So that is all clear there. Is there a mover for this item? Councillor Thompson.
I seek to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. A seconder for this item? Councillor Liz Roberts, I see you. I'll go to Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. The purpose of the report to consider planning permit application T210808 PA for the construction of 5 dwellings at 10 Cardinia Street was initially lodged with council with the purpose of 6 dwellings and a whole host of conditions that didn't meet requirements. The concerns were put back to the applicant, and another application was amended and submitted in January 2024. And while some things were addressed, there were still an outstanding list of issues, such as the proposed setback does not meet the required setback, being that of 9 metres, a shortfall in the garden area requirements I think the application said 36%. The mandatory requirement is 35%, and upon further investigation, it came in at about 32%. There's a cumulative impact of the provision of 2 access ways, limited opportunities for canopy trees to screen the double-storey built from form proposed along the length of the site, and the ability of the development to integrate with the streetscape over time. And the big one for me personally is the proposal departs from both the existing and emerging future character by resulting in a lengthy attached built form extended throughout the site. And being someone who's grown up in Cardinia Shire my whole life, knowing the area, there's parts of Pakenham that we need to preserve as parts of Pakenham. So making sure that neighbourhood character and streetscape and things like that are adhered to and are protected to a certain extent on what is a semi-quiet part of Pakenham north of Ahern Road, to make sure that we don't just start plonking in duplexes and townhouses and things like that. It is something that is important to me. We have other places and areas for that within the Shire, and this isn't appropriate to me. So yes, I do support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I'll go to your seconder, Councillor Liz Roberts.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you. This particular property on Gardner Street, moving and developing it for 5 dwellings, as Councillor Thompson mentioned, the applicant has reduced it by 1, but it's very much out of character with the neighbourhood. We're going to see more of these sort of applications come our way, given that we're in a housing crisis. People see these larger blocks as an opportunity to develop and assist with the provision of more homes, but it needs to be done in a way that's sympathetic to the neighbourhood in which it's placed. There were 3 objections, many of which mention the neighbourhood character, and although there were changes made to reduce the impacts in the second lot of plans that have been put through, there's still a fair few things that haven't been covered off, particularly in terms of the vegetation and the overlooking and privacy issues. As I said, these applications, we're going to get more and more of these coming through, and we need to be making sure that the ones that we do approve are to a really good standard. With these homes, are going to be built and they're going to stand for 40, 50 years, and we need them to be adding to our housing stock producing quality rather than just rushing for quantity. So that's the reason that I can't. I agree with the officer's recommendation to refuse this application.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Are there any other speakers to this one? Councillor Potter.
I'm also disappointed that this application hasn't met the mark, as we really do need more housing in Victoria generally, Cardinia included. And I'm really conscious of the housing crisis we're in. We need affordable housing, but I want ones that are good quality. So it also must be something that's livable and complementary in character to our area. And I don't feel like this development is in character with the residential area it wants to build in. It was said by one of the objectors, I believe, that they felt like it would create a city-like atmosphere in that part of Pakenham, which is not in keeping with the rest of the place. So yeah, I also won't approve it either. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Are there any other speakers? That's okay. I'll jump in. This is just in Pakenham Hills Ward, I believe, and I'm really glad you mentioned protecting the amenity of Pakenham. It's a conversation that I want us to be having more and more frequently. Pakenham has carried the can of growth for this Shire for 20 years and has seen benefit to that, no doubt, but has also seen tremendous disadvantage that the surrounding townships have not seen and hopefully will never see. And so the older part of Pakenham in the north there that you're talking about, Councillor Thompson, Cardinia Street, off there, Ahern Road and all that there, it is a beautiful part of our local area, and where we can protect it, we should protect it. You okay, Mr. O'Hara? It's a fact that the state planning scheme will allow for developments of this nature. We will see more and more older houses on these bigger blocks turn into units. I think the residents of Pakenham are starting to grate on them a little, and I agree with them, but it's a fact. Where the state planning scheme allows it, we will inevitably have to approve it. But where we have some say, where we're seeing one older house turn into 6 or 5 units and they've paid no, they've disregarded setbacks and things of that nature, I'm really proud that this council said no. Because Councillor Potter's right, we are in a housing crisis, but we have seen when we throw standards aside to try and solve an immediate problem, the long-term disadvantage and impact that can have on a township. So I don't want to see that happen. We know Pakenham is going to develop, and we know that probably around the train station of Pakenham is the right place for it to develop and grow and go up. But otherwise, I think we should be trying to protect that beautiful town as much as we can. So I'm going to support the officer recommendation, and I want to thank them for their work. I know this has been on the cards for a long time, this application. So thank you. If there's no other speakers, I'll go back to Councillor Thompson to sum up.
I don't think there's anything further to add, Mayor. It's been all summed up pretty well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll put the officer recommendation to 5.3 up for a vote. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. 5.4 T220667 PA use and development of a childcare centre 24 to 26 Honeyeater Way, Pakenham. The officer recommendation is that Council authorise Council statutory planning officers to settle the planning appeal, VCAT reference P1065/2024, via consent in accordance with the amended plans circulated by the applicant on 15 January 2025 and subject to the conditions as listed in the agenda. Do I have a mover for this item? I see none. Councillor Roberts? Yep, Councillor Roberts, just in time. Would you like to move the officer's recommendation, Councillor Roberts?
Yes, I move the officer's recommendation as written.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for Councillor Roberts? Councillor Pomeroy. Councillor Roberts to speak first.
As in the recommendation, you'll see that this this particular matter has come back to us after the applicant appealed a previous decision made by Council at VCAT. The first stage of that process is that there be discussions by council officers under authority to find movement to improve the application, rather than the process isn't such that we go straight to a full hearing. And through that process, the applicant has been able to bring back some amended plans. Just in terms of this particular application and its location, at the moment there is a kindergarten at Pakenham Springs Children's Centre, council facility, another childcare centre down on Henry Road, but there aren't a lot of childcare. There isn't a lot of childcare provision in that corner of Pakenham, so there is a need for this. The new plans have made a particular effort to address some of the concerns from the objectors, with increase in the height of fencing, some amendments to the balcony so that there isn't overlooking into the neighbours from the balcony, changes to the car parking, which has also improved the way that waste can be collected from the site, and improved. This also has the car park also has some improvement in disability access. So I feel that the changes that have been made, which have also meant that the centre can still cater for the same number of children, is a good thing. Every private childcare centre that can be built in the Shire takes the burden off council's early learning building program. we need to be still building kindergartens. Our population is still growing. They need to be located close to where families live, so that if they don't have a car, or they can walk their children to the centre, or if it's near a bus route, it's also useful. Then the parent can walk the child to the centre and then catch their bus to work, for example. So this, from that point of view, this centre is well located. So as I said, this centre will most likely host a kindergarten class, which then means it's another kindergarten room that doesn't need to be provided in a site paid for by residents, and other residents and ratepayers as part of their rates contribution. So I'm satisfied that there've been significant changes to which answer many of the concerns of the objectors. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. I'll go to Councillor Pomeroy as a seconder.
The provision of childcare across our Shire is incredibly important. We are a very young community, and these types of facilities allow many families to have dual incomes and single parent families to be further supported throughout the day for not only baby care, but also for kinder. My children were fortunate enough to go to childcare kinder because I wanted to work a 9 to 5, and at that point in time, kinders weren't flexible enough. So I really appreciate that VCAT and the planners will work together to see this one through. It is very important in our area, and also to have walking distance to families, and it will help up to 80 families. So I'd like to support this one.
Thank you, Councillor Pomeroy. Are there any other councillors to speak to this one? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to just say that many of the objections were around increased traffic within the area, the aesthetics of the childcare centre, as well as potential noise problems. As far as the traffic goes, I think by the time this is built, that whole Webster Way used to be used as a bit of a rat run while the freeway upgrades and things like that were going on. So I don't think Webster Way will always be as heavily congested as it is currently in its current form. And I think with the amended plans, with the entry being now on Honeyeater and not on Webster, should help alleviate some of these traffic concerns. And obviously the amended plans have higher fencing as well to help with some of the noise pollution. And as far as the aesthetic goes, the plans look like they fit. They are quite of the area, up to date, modern, and there are other double-storey buildings within the area as well. So I do think aesthetically it does fit. So I am happy to support the amended plans post VCAT. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Are there any other speakers to this one? That's okay. Just so we are all clear in the chamber, and also so that the community is clear as well, I'm just going to ask Debbie Tyson to confirm. So the reason that this item is back in the chamber, because obviously this is a decision that council has previously made, is that council resolved to refuse this childcare centre. The applicant subsequently took council to VCAT to challenge that decision. VCAT threw out council's decision. They request us to mediate, right? And so then council's coming back now to us to mediate that. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mayor, for the question. So you're right. The first decision was that officers needed to act on was that council issue a notice of refusal.
Yep.
So that's what was issued. The applicant has 60 days to appeal that notice of refusal to VCAT. So therefore it's taken out of council's hands. So we're no longer the responsible authority, and it moves into the VCAT decision making. VCAT's requested council to mediate an outcome, and hence this is what's before council. So if we didn't go back with any mediation, then the VCAT could actually make a decision either way.
Yep. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Just because I think it's important and to be clear and transparent as to why this has come back to council. So I'm satisfied with that, and I'm satisfied with the officer recommendations with this item. So if there's no other councillors to speak, we'll go back to the mover to sum up, please.
I'd finally like to just acknowledge the work that the council officers have done in mediation to bring these plans back to council, and acknowledge that that childcare centres are a use permitted in this particular area. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Roberts. So we'll now put the officer recommendation to 5.4 up for a vote. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. Item 5.5, planning matters dealt with by officers under delegated authority from Feb 2025. The recommendation is that council note the planning matters report from 13 November 2024 to 15 January 2025 report. Do I have a mover? I see Councillor Owen.
Sorry, I left it on. Sorry. I move the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Thompson. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is a regular feature of our town planning agenda. So the recommendation is that council note the planning matters report from the 13th of November 2024 to the 15th of January 2025. So it is a larger period of time, and there is a lot of delegated decisions made, and this report details those. I know Beacon Hills Ward had 15 for that period, which is quite significant. I just wanted to talk about two delegated decisions in Beacon Hills Ward. Number 2, Montuna Grove Guys Hill. The application sought approval to amend planning permit C120364 so as to allow for the use of land for an art gallery, building and works and display of signage. A decommissioned W-class tram is proposed to be located on the site, which is where the proposed art gallery was to go and be adjoining the existing studio, which has operated by the original permit since 2012. The applicant was advertised 3 times during varying amendments, and there was a total of 3 objections from the initial round of advertising, and then no further objections for the subsequent advertising period. The matter was determined under delegation as the application did not receive 4 or more objections and did not seek approval for any reduction or waiver of car parking. This decision has since been appealed to VCAT, and a hearing is proposed in July 2025. The next one I would like to talk about is 355 at Beaconsfield Emerald Road, Guys Hill. The application sought approval for the use and development of the land for a place of worship, removal of vegetation, and a reduction to the number of car parking spaces required. The application proposed to primarily utilise the existing building on the site, abate with some minor modifications, a maximum patron numbers of 50 people, and hours of operation of Monday 9 a.m. to 9 p.m, Tuesday to Saturday 9 a.m. to 5 p.m, and Sunday 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. The proposed use triggered a car parking requirement of 15 spaces, and a total of 13 spaces were proposed to be provided on the site, and therefore approval was sought for the reduction of 2 spaces. The applicant was advertised twice during varying amendments to the proposal, and received a total of 3 objections. So the matter was determined under delegation as the application did not receive 4 or more objections, and the car parking reduction was 2 spaces. I did meet with the planners after it was advertised in the council bulletin, and I was satisfied that with the addition of the 2 off-street car parking directly opposite or abutting this property, it did meet the car parking requirements. So it was obviously dealt with by delegated authority, but I just thought it was really important about the thorough process that these decisions are made, and why they go through to delegated authority and not come before town committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Owen. I'd just like to echo that, yes, it is over a larger period of time, but I do like how many things have actually gone through town planning. So a big thank you to all locals and residents that actually do go through the proper process, whether it's removing vegetation, signage, subdivision, building carports, building verandas, the whole swag of things that by the dozens are in this report is absolutely fantastic to see. And a big thank you to all of our officers for churning through these applications and getting through them as quickly and as efficiently as possible so that, people continue to do the right thing and everything is up to scratch, up to code, and fully compliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Are there any other speakers to this item? Seeing none, so I'll go back to Councillor Owen to sum up.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson, for your comments. It is a great report. I do encourage councillors to regularly read through this report. The last couple of days, after a few queries from other councillors as well, I made some inquiries about the background of these applications. I think it's really important for councillors to understand, the reasons for these decisions are made through delegated authority. And it's also good for us to explain to residents why it was dealt with by delegated authority. There is obviously magic numbers around objections that really, before it comes to council, town planning committee. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, so we'll put the officer recommendation to 5.5 up for a vote. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. Moving on to agenda item number 5.6, Planning Matters VCAT Report, Feb 2025. The recommendation is that council note the Planning Matters Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal Report, February 2025. Acknowledges that a full roof replacement of the facility is not, I think there's some bad notes in here. I think we're just noting the report, which is very good for a laugh. I'll go to Councillor Nicoll as the mover. Do you move the officer's recommendation?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'd move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Ross as seconder. Thank you, Councillor Ross. I see that. I'll go to you, Councillor Nicoll.
Yes, thank you. Again, it's a good report, and I'd note with the volume of approvals and the obvious busyness of the planning department in processing, both under delegated authority and also preparing for council decision, the number of planning proposals, to only have a list of 4 is potentially significant. And then of the list of 4 that have gone to VCAT, 2 have been withdrawn. 1 has been affirmed by VCAT, and only 1 was overturned by VCAT. Ironically, given tonight's discussion, also a place of worship, this time in a green wedge. But overall, that low volume is a testament, I think, to the thoroughness of the planning team's work and preparation of their reports. And so I'd like to commend them as part of this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Nicoll. I'll go to your seconder, Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Nicoll, for moving this noting of this item. Just noting in here, we've got one item, as was pointed out, at 195 Door Road, Pakenham, which was refused, I believe, twice by council. And there's been a decision set aside with the permit has been issued. I'd like to ask General Manager Debbie Tyson to just explain a little bit about what's happened here, please. Without notice, I'm sorry about dropping that on you.
Through you, Mayor, I might invite Duncan Turner, Manager of the Planning Department, Planning Design, to come up and answer that question. If that's all right with you, Mayor. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, through you, Mayor. Councillors, the applicant sought an appeal through the tribunal for council's refusal of this planning application. The key issue at hand really related to the appropriateness of locating a place of worship within the Green Wedge, and probably the key point of discussion that the tribunal accepted was that the proximity of that Green Wedge site to the urban growth boundary was a significant factor for them in terms of ultimately supporting the proposal that was under consideration. So it's quite a detailed decision, and it's can be quite instructive, I think, in terms of thinking through the role of green wedge land, particularly in close proximity to urban growth boundaries. But ultimately, every decision needs to be judged on its own merits and within its own context as well. So that was really the key issue at play for the tribunal in its consideration.
Great, thank you, Duncan. Thanks, Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor. I just thought that was really important because sometimes these issues come up on council, and for the community who only see a refusal or a decision, it's good to have it explained to them in short term why it came about in brief, so they have a better understanding of what's happened. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Are there any other speakers to this item? I'll go back to Councillor Nicol to sum up.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I didn't
thought you saw me.
I was looking
Sorry,
at
you look straight through me.
Oh, yeah.
Visible man. Can I?
Councillor Owen, go ahead.
You may. I just thought you saw my hand.
No, I thought you just staring
Sorry.
at me, paying attention.
Thank
Like a
you,
good
Mayor.
councillor.
I would like to speak on this item, Door Road. It is a very important item to talk about. It's a 32-page decision. There was the applicant and 10 other parties that were combined with this hearing. So that's quite significant. And yes, council's decision was overturned, but it was, in my opinion, not a frivolous process. VCAT seriously considered this application. And in summary, the decision discusses the proposal's response to green wedge policy, the local policy for agriculture, discourages non-rural uses in the green wedge unless adjoining the UGB, urban growth boundary, and strategically justified. Member Code formed the view that the preferred interpretation of proximity or nearness rather than the ordinary meaning of the word. In this instance, the land is 300 metres from the UGB and separated by 2 other lots. He also made the point that the proposal provides social and community infrastructure near a growth area. Overall, significant weight was given to the proximity to the UGB, the agricultural activities proposed on the balance of the land to complement the use and the site response design. So I do encourage all councillors to read this decision. There was some changes. So a reduction in the maximum number of people attending services from 150 to 120, a reduction in the maximum number of people attending seasonal religious services, maximum 4 times a year from 400 to 300, a reduction in the operating hours associated with daily activities between 5:30 a.m. to 10 p.m. to between 7 a.m. and 9:30 p.m. So obviously there was some changes to the permit, and the member does provide commentary regarding the need for green wedge management plans, and the Southern Ranges, which Door Road is lacking a green wedge management plan. So definitely this decision will be instructive. However, each application still needs to be judged on its merits and unique context. So I look forward to this council reviewing this decision to see how we can improve, bolster, or make our planning scheme more rigorous in responding to these applications in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Yeah, my take on that decision, I guess, is that I think the original recommendation was to approve that Sikh temple, and I think councillors did an amended motion to refuse that. So from my perspective, this is an example of the system working. I think our planners probably got it right initially. Councillors exercised their democratic right, as is their right to do so, to refuse. A notice of rescission went up on this issue, which lost, and now it's ultimately gone to VCAT. So it has been a drawn-out process, but I respect the fact that the process has ultimately worked, and I think in the end, under the planning scheme, the right outcome probably happened, despite us exercising our right as a council wholly to look the other way on that one, or to go the other way on that one, I should say. So, yeah, certainly a big one that's come up, the biggest one that's come up in our council in recent times, I think. All right, are there any other councillors to speak to this report? I see none. No secret hands up. I'll go back to Councillor Nicol to sum up.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, councillors, for the discussion on that place of worship one as well from this particular report. It does provide opportunity for the organisation to learn and many insights about green wedge management planning, but also places of worship planning into the future. So thank you very much. But again, I'd just like to reiterate the low volume that are finding their way to VCAT, and the fact that a couple of cases are withdrawn. Again, I think it's a testament to the integrity and the diligence that's brought to the planning applications by the planning team. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nicol. We'll put the officer recommendation to 5.6 up for a vote. All those in favour? I declare that carried unanimously. Item 5.7, Planning Scheme Amendment Activity Report, Feb 2025. The officer recommendation is that Council note the active planning scheme amendments report. Do I have a mover for this item? Councillor Pomeroy.
I'd like to move that the active planning scheme amendment report is noted.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Ross, I see you online. Councillor Pomeroy to speak.
So the following three active planning scheme amendments relate to the Victorian Planning Authority Officer South Employment Precinct, the Cardinia, the municipal-wide environmentally sustainable development local policy, and the James Hicks Lot AA PS 814723 Cotswold Crescent in Officer. So that's an amendment under the Planning Environment Act in relation to the heritage overlay. So council is kind of working through these at the moment. There is no really significant updates. The Standing Advisory Committee hearing was conducted for the Officer South Employment Precinct last March, but we are still waiting for the panel report to be released. So looking forward to seeing that one.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Ross as a seconder.
Nothing further. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Are there any other councillors who want to contribute to this item? Councillor Owen, I see you.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to talk about C282 James Hicks Pottery. I know Councillor Potter's very interested in this, which is Cotswold Crescent in Officer. The planning scheme amendment requests from the owners seek to change the schedule to clause 43.01 heritage overlay to allow prohibited uses for H0104, thereby enabling council to consider a concurrent planning permit application for a office use. The amendment is necessary to enable the consideration of the proposed office use, which will support the conservation of heritage structures while ensuring the significance of the heritage site is not adversely affected. So this report will come to council in March, and council will consider whether council seeks authorisation from the minister to start the amendment process. And this is the first step of a long step. Authorisation from the minister, exhibition, consider submissions, planning panel hearing, consider panel report, and then approval. We all know the site, the Hicks Pottery, very important for the history of Officer particularly, and also Cardinia. We appreciate, the strong concern that residents do have, and the will of the community to see that, protected and celebrated in any future development. So I think it is positive. We're getting movement on this site. Let's hopefully we see a really good outcome, but that just talks about the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Owen. Are there any other speakers? We'll go back to Councillor Pomeroy.
Nothing further, Mayor.
Thank you. We'll put the officer recommendation to 5.7 up for a vote. All those in favour? Against? I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. That now concludes tonight's meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance and your participation. The next council meeting will be an ordinary meeting, will be on the 17th of Feb 2025 at 7 p.m. in the chambers. I now declare the meeting closed at 8:30. Thank you.